remember, people still concerned, how does this affect me? Okay, so as a leader, what you want to make sure that you're doing is you're addressing.
Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm Henry Kirk,
And I'm Jonathan Aronson.
and today we are going to talk about change management. And this is something that I honestly can admit I don't do very well with, so I'm looking forward to you helping me out with this, Jonathan.
Free coaching again, Henry.
Absolutely. That's what this is about.
Well, good morning, everyone, and afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Yeah, we're going to talk about change. And change leadership, change management, your role as a leader in change when change is going on. um, so a lot of times, a big part of our audience are software engineers, and there's a lot of change that goes on with tech companies, especially those startup companies, right? It's like, oh, be nimble, and we've been doing it this way, but now we're going to take a hard right and do it this way, and then we're going to go left again. And how do you deal with it all? Or I had, a client this year, pretty well known company, you might know it. And it was a tech company, and they had to change going from a public company to a private equity company. And, the private equity company goes, well, we got some changes we'd like to implement. So, how do you deal with it? How do you navigate it? How do you keep your team motivated, positive, looking forward? Not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm not going to tell you that, oh, yeah, piece of cake. But the one thing I can tell you, Henry, change is inevitable. I don't care where you go. Even IBM back in the day went from a white shirt to a blue shirt. That was a huge change. Um, so and now you see people in t-shirts and ripped jeans at work. So people, that's a simple kind of change, obviously, not as complicated, but it still affects people. So you mentioned, let's just start off, Henry. I'm curious to know, you said you're not good at it. What's that about?
I'm not good at it. I think that I for me personally, like I struggle to essentially understand how to navigate change. So, for example, throughout my career at Google, I've been at Google 8 years, and I've had about 6 or 7 managers
Hmm.
throughout the course of my career there. That's a lot. I've only moved teams 3 official times. And so that meant like lots of reorganizations with while I was on the same team, where usually it was above me that was changing, and then I would have to then deal and navigate that change, and then make sure that my team was comfortable through those changes and unimpacted. The majority of the time, my team was generally unimpacted, and so it was always where I struggled the most was is I had a good relationship with my manager. I understood what was expected. I thought I was on a good trajectory for delivering like valuable products and navigating. We've talked in the past like navigating the different politics and organizational complexities. So when change comes in there, I'm like back at zero, and I just struggle to kind of like building a relationship takes time and building trust with that person. So all of a sudden you got to start all over again. So there's just so much to do, and I get a little freaked out, to be honest.
So when you say freaked out, what's that exactly mean?
Sometimes I'll get stressed out because I don't know this person, and there's a fear of, let's say, them changing the way I'm operating my team. because not some managers micromanage, some don't. So it's also the unknown of whether this person is going to want to micromanage me or not. Perhaps is this person
Hmm.
going to want to give me the same support that my team might have had, with the flexibility with projects and things like that. It's like there's all these, it's like the fear of the unknown, essentially, and I have no control over
Hmm.
that. So it's like trying to be able to understand and dive in. Yeah. I got too
Yeah, the
comfortable,
fear of the end.
basically.
So you're getting anxiety. You're
Yep.
projecting about the future where you don't know what's happening, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what people go through on change, depending on what it is. And we'll there's a model out there that a change model, and somebody put this together. It was based on a couple different change leadership models. One by a team called Kubler Ross, and the other one is Bridges. And the model really is about what people go through with change, right? Now, when there's major organizational change, think of it like two mountains, right? So you have a smaller mountain, you have a bigger mountain, and what happens is leadership goes, hey, this mountain's okay, but it's not really doing what we need. We really should get to the other mountain. All right. And they're flying over looking at the mountains, right? They're up there going, so we should pivot this way, and let's go to the new mountain. So let's make it happen, right? And people generally what's not realized by very senior leaders sometimes is that the people that have to go to the new mountain, well, they have to actually walk there. They can't fly there, right? So, meaning, and the metaphor of that is that it's a much more arduous kind of journey to get from one mountain to the other. So, okay, and whether you stay, like for instance, we mentioned about the Google layoffs, right? Well, that think about the people who stayed, okay, and were still there, and the change that they had to go through. Of course, the people who got laid off, that was going to be a major change, right? Like all of a sudden, uh, I don't have a job. So the first thing that people go through, shock. Oh my God, right? The bigger the change, the bigger the shock. Then they go through denial. I can't believe this is really happening. Really? I got an email? It's like, I don't have a job. I had a job a few hours ago. What happened? I didn't see this coming, or I didn't know about this change, or whatever. Or I can't believe they're breaking up this team, or it could be any of those. That's the denial phrase. Then the next one, they go into frustration, right? It's like, oh my God, I can't do anything about it. It's not my control. I just feel like I'm, you know, I'm just super frustrated with the whole situation. And then they get to the bottom of the mountain. Think of it as they're going through this, they're going down the first mountain, right? And they get to the bottom, and you can reach depression in this. Sitting at home after losing your job, that certainly can feel depressive, or even staying in the company and your friends have left, your colleagues have left, you're now solely responsible for, what's in front, and there's not as much support. That could lead to depression. Until you get to that part, you're not going to start really up. They talk about hitting the bottom, right? That's what they're talking about there. Then finally they start moving up, and accepting the change is the next part, where like I have no control over this. This is happening. If I could, and focusing on the future more in a positive way, or in a way where I need to get a handle on this, and I need to move forward. You can't go back. It's done, right? So that's the acceptance phase. Now, a lot of times in organizations, leadership thinks we're there. They've accepted this change and we're good to go. But it's
Mm-hmm.
actually not. Okay. And what's happening is they're where they might have been more supportive in the past about this change, they think, oh, they accept, we're good, let's go, right? But really, it's not until you get to that point of integration with the change, so you're accepting, but now you have to integrate within the change, that you really get to the top of the second mountain. So that's what people go through. So I don't know. So thinking about that, shock, denial, frustration, depression, acceptance, and integration. You know, thinking about your own situation when it came to change, what do you think you went through there, Henry?
I went through everything except when I was laid off. I think I skipped a couple of those, to be honest. I was shocked for a couple minutes, and then I accepted it and went into action.
Uh huh.
I had every single one of those emotions and stages when I would have a new manager, and it,
Okay.
and like literally to the almost to the T, where I would be super shocked because no one ever told me. There's not one
Yeah.
manager change that I knew about ahead of time, maybe a day or two, and
Hmm.
I always felt that that was pretty. Like I was, as a manager of a large team, you would think that senior leadership would give me the courtesy to understand about it so I can process it and be able to kind of let the team know in a way, like ease them into this thing so some of these stages don't necessarily happen, right? Because change, like there's big fear of change, but it doesn't. I would always find out like the day of or something like that or the day before. And that always bothered me. And so and I would go through the same thing that the rest of the team would go through. Now, generally speaking, I was the most direct impacted because it was my team that was moving around usually.
Right.
And and then I would, be in shock and I'd be like, why is this happening to me? It's crazy. Yet again, got to start all over again. Because having a good relationship with your manager is important. And they're also, supportive of you. Like you're, working on the same projects. Then you get a new manager and they're like, I don't think this project's important. And then they got to reshuffle it. And it just, that causes a lot of stress and whatnot. And then I just feel like I'm at
Hmm.
the bottom of the mountain again, trying to go. Like I feel like I was at the top of the mountain the whole time when everything was great. Then you start at the bottom
Yep.
and then it's just a climb up. And that always bothered me because of the really the fear of change. I never. We've talked a lot about this. Like I never, and this is probably also what we've talked in the past, like where I struggle in like just corporate world. Like it makes no sense when they shuffle things around sometimes. Like I feel like leadership shuffle things for the fact of to put their like a new leader comes in and they shuffle things around because they think that
Hmm.
that's what they're supposed to do because then they have their
Yep.
mark on things and it doesn't necessarily make things more efficient or better or whatever. It's just I feel like they just shuffle. So I was shuffled a lot and it just caught and I don't think it ever always benefited us in the long run. So I didn't deal with it very well. I was not I was in every time that it happened, I was very supportive of the new manager that came in, except once. Yep,
Except once.
except once. Couldn't. Yeah, the one time it happened, like turned my entire career upside down, and we could talk about that
Hmm.
another time. But like that, like that person was so much different than other managers that had come in. I had no skills whatsoever to be able to deal with that manager style, that style of that manager. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I
Okay.
agree. I've went through all of it, and it's a struggle, and it's frustrating.
So, if you were a leader, or when you're a leader, if you knew all about this, that are going through this, how would that knowledge support you? Do you believe?
Well, I think that um, I think I what I would do certainly do is talk to my let my team know that it's okay that you're going through these things. This is a normal stuff that they're going to feel like
Mhm.
they are going to have to start at the bottom. They're going to have to figure things out, develop new relationships, and just let them know that it's okay for them to have these sorts of feelings and that it's a normal cycle to go through.
Yep.
And to make sure that they're very well supported when they're at the bottom. Because it doesn't, the depression and unhappiness doesn't happen instantaneously. it does take, like in my own experience, it takes a while for that to get to the bottom. Maybe a week, a couple weeks, could take a month, whatever it is, and all of a sudden you're at the bottom. You're like, "Ah." And this is when the person starts saying, "I need to leave the team. I need to leave the company. Their performance drops and things like that." And you have to be very, very aware of that, and try to prevent that from happening. So it's really important to have good communication channel with your reports or your team for that.
Um, so this is where you really want to put your coaching hat on. Really important. All right. And what I mean by coaching hat is that you're there allowing your team member to be able to express how they're feeling, what they're going through, and coaching them on, okay, you're, empathize with them. We talked about empathy in other podcasts we did. But then, you want to move them towards acceptance. I mean, there's so many things in change that are out of control. You don't have, in your case, you had a new leader. You had no idea by the time it happened, it was already done deal. You couldn't go back and say, no, that's not good. You have to bring back the other guy. I mean, it's not going to happen, right? So you as a leader is about moving people through those emotions by empathizing. You don't have to be a psychologist. I'm not saying that, okay? I just want to be clear on that. But you have to be a coach. And coach is present moment forward focused, right? That's where you are. So get where they are and say, okay, well, we understand these were out of our control. We can't change it, but what can we do given the circumstances in order to move towards acceptance or more?
Mm.
Let's relook at this. There's a book out there called "Who Moved My Cheese?" Look, I have it right here, and it was a staple in corporate America, especially I think during the '80s and the '90s. That it was, and it's a parable on a couple mice that ran out of food, and the change was we don't have any more cheese, and we have to go through this maze to go find cheese. Well, one mouse was like, "I'm not moving. I'm going to wait and see if the cheese show up," meaning I'm not going to do anything and maybe it'll go back to how it was. Right. The other guy, the other mouse, put on his running shoes and took off in search of cheese. Well, it's a maze. You're not going to find the answer right away. You got to kind of navigate yourself through it. And eventually the mouse found some cheese, but there wasn't as much cheese as he would like. So, he had to go continue on until he found the mountain of cheese that could sustain him for a long time. Meanwhile, the other mouse just kept refusing to move.
Mm.
And, eventually, um, basically, I don't know, in the book, I can't remember whether he died of starvation or what, but the point of it is, it's going to happen, take action, move forward. Um, and the role of the leader is to be supported, put on that coaching hat. Um, there was an interesting thing. I was coaching somebody this past year who this company went through major change. And he said they had a shift in leadership. The CTO changed. And the old CTO wouldn't communicate anything. And the new CTO was very transparent in what was going on. And my client, who was a director for this couple teams, he said the transparency was vital when it comes to change. So, what are your thoughts around that, Henry, about transparency when it comes to change?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, it would have been great if I kind of was aware of it so I can help prepare my team for it maybe, or like I don't understand the reason that in corporate America they announce change like instantaneously without giving anyone a heads up. It would have been so much better if they said, "Hey, we're looking into a restructuring for XYZ." Now, I get that you don't want to create anxiety amongst the team that there's pending change. Like, imagine if they announced, like, I think Amazon or Facebook Meta had announced that layoffs were coming in the next couple months, and everyone got bent out of shape about that. I can see that. But if you're just saying, so that's like the extreme case where maybe it doesn't always work out well because then everyone's like
Hmm.
on walking on eggshells. But the but for most change, you should be like, hey, and when I had looking into layering my team as it was growing and I couldn't handle the number of direct reports that I had in a healthy way, I let them know. And I remember HR, scolding me for this, and I had let everyone know that that change was inevitable, and that I would work with the team and let them know that it was coming. I would give them a heads up of who was the candidates for the manager. And I tried to promote within because I felt that that was the best way to improve trust and other stuff. So I give everyone that was on the team the first opportunity at that role when we were going to do it. So that way, people already knew that. I would ask them questions. Well, hey, how would you feel if this person would lead you? Like, is it can and work out all of those issues. So when it happened, we had zero problems. HR was upset with me though because they said that I should have never let anyone know ahead of time that this was sort of happening. I didn't dive too much into it, but I just think it's kind of interesting that it's like I was trying to be sensitive towards the my people on my team by doing this, but then in the flip side, every other reorg that I've been through, I would just find out one day, and that
Yeah.
would always cause a problem. And that was always the struggle that I had. Like I just couldn't understand why they couldn't have given the courtesy and say, "Hey, this is what's happening." It just yeah, I think it just caused more problems than what it was worth.
Yeah. So, is it the devil you do know or the devil you find out right at the last minute, So, um, I think you mentioned why companies don't do it. They don't want to create this anxiety, or they don't want people to leave because the change is coming. They want, for whatever reason. I'm not saying I agree with that or not, but then, you know, is it when do you talk about the change? And sometimes the change happens. Unfortunately, leaders are let go because for whatever reason they don't think they're hitting the mark, for instance, or the expectation, and then all of a sudden you have a new leader, or the leader's taking a new job and he doesn't want to let everybody know too soon that they're leaving, because of the stability that they have now, and they don't want it to create instability until it's here. That's probably a more of a philosophical type of
Yeah,
discussion. But I think transparency, once you know there's change, what's going on regarding the change, and what's the organization or the team leaders going to do in order to uh, be able to move forward through the change,
do
not
you
keep it people from knowing.
do you think that in addition to transparency that those impacted by change should have at least some sort of voice in the discussion for that change?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different models out there that shows that yes, you want to have some voices involved with the change going on. There's usually depending if it's a huge reorganization, there's usually a committee that is put together to help navigate the change. They might bring outside consultants in, organizational development consultants, in order to help as an outsider, or you know taking data, and then look for themes, and then create some kind of what they called um, uh, interaction with people about how to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So do yes, I do, but it depends. On your team, you may not be discussed about this change. It's way over the team. It's not about the team per se. It's more about the direction the company's going, or the senior leadership of the company, um, and it affects the team. But the team isn't. Ideally, they're not brought in to discuss it because there's really nothing to discuss at that point.
I see.
But I think if you have a new leader coming in, to a change, understanding what your team might be feeling and going through could help them towards that integration a lot faster than not knowing, right? Not being empathetic for what's going on. Now, are there leaders? You said to me when we were discussing um, this podcast today that, you mentioned sometimes leaders come in, they just want to make their mark. Okay. Now think about this. I want to make my mark. I want to show people how great I am and do something outstanding, and not really talking to the team about where the value might be with what they want to do. So that's another thing about leadership. That's when you bring your team in, saying, hey, partner with them. Don't, you want to lead them, but you want to partner with them, right? So say, hey, I got some ideas from my experience, and then would like to kind of maybe integrate some of these ideas into how we operate as a team, and then bring them into the discussion. That's when it's important, because you're building that trust and respect. You don't have it yet.
I think in my experience, when you go through a reorg that's a few levels above the team, their apprehension is not necessarily on them. It's that if their projects get deprioritized, the work that they've been working on so most technology products at big tech can take sometimes years to get out. It's just weird how that happens. Startups, they can pump stuff out in a few months, but big tech companies, sometimes it could take half a year, sometimes 2 years. And so their biggest concern is that, will all of this work that I've done never see the light of day? It's not always, well, now it's probably like losing, will I lose my job over this? But it previously that used to be the tension that would happen. So the conversations I would have after the reorganization announcements, where there'd be some leadership changes at the top, would always be, what's going to happen to our projects? Are they going to be reprioritized? Are they going to be,
Yeah.
is my work going to be basically devalued by the company? And so I think like the hardest, yeah, I think that in my opinion, the worst way to invoke change is to wait to the last minute and not tell anyone. I think that in my opinion, that is the sign that they would rather deal with the fallout than actually have to deal with the letting people know ahead of time that this is coming, and that these are the justifications for it, and that we're going to work together, and that, hey, like, if you have concerns, let me know. And that's what I was trying to get out from the team when I was going to make these management changes. Like, what would make you leave the team? Because I know that they're going to go through certain stages where they may feel unhappy. So, a few people would tell me that, well, I'm most concerned with losing the mentorship that, I was providing them. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't have to stop, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, great. And it's a lot of things like that. You don't know what it is till you dive in. And so I've always felt that doing it the last minute is the worst way to do it. I know it takes a lot of time to prepare for some of these changes. Now, you did bring up changes where I understand where like people leave and you have to replace them quickly and you don't want to create instability. But I almost, at least in the teams that I've been on, I feel like it creates more instability. And maybe you can like help me think through this a little bit. I think it creates more instability when someone leaves and you have to replace them. Let's say they're announcing they're leaving. You know that they're leaving 2 months from now, so you start interviewing, and then they have that, and then you replace them at the end, and no one knows that they're leaving. Like, I think that creates a lot of instability when they have that switch in there, when it flips it. I also think that there's a lot of instability when a new leader comes in because of a shuffling, and then there is plan for more reshuffling, but they don't let anyone know that. They say, we're going to evaluate things and let them know. It's pretty obvious that it's going to come. And then throughout, because of that lack of straightforward and transparency, you end up creating a lot of mixed emotions throughout the reporting chain in that way. So I think I have never seen it done well, to be honest.
Change is difficult. Okay. So, and depending on who you are and how, from what your optics are from where you're seeing it. Like, the CEO, when there's change in the org, is seeing it from a different lens than a team member on a team because again, they're flying over the mountain and you're having to deal with the
Mm.
actual, change itself. I think there's a happy medium in there, right? You can't say it too soon, depending on what the change is, because that's going to create, instability and, trying to navigate through uncertainty. It's a difficult situation, and when you're dealing with uncertainty, when I'm coaching people around that, it's like, well, let's first start what you do know, not what you don't know. Okay. And then start looking forward on what's the possibilities that could happen here. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out. What do you know to be true today? How could this affect you or your team tomorrow? You also said an interesting thing when you were talking about mentoring, like that example. Remember, people still concerned, how does this affect me? Okay. So as a leader, what you want to make sure that you're doing is you're addressing that, not always from the company standpoint, although you are, as a leader, you're the expectations that you support the company's initiatives. Um, but also remember that the team member is more focused on, how is this personally going to affect me? What is this doing to me? And that's where the empathy comes in, and listening to them and saying, well, what concerns do you have? Let them tell you. Don't be afraid of it. Go right at it. Let them talk to you about it. And then be truthful and transparent when discussing. And they go, well, it's not fair. Or, they could say, or we worked on this project for so long and now it's going. And it's like, yeah, I get it, you know? But what could happen out of this? Could we get another better project? Could we use part of this project? Is there an integration with another team that will be able to expand? We don't know that yet. Do we? And ask. Well, I guess not. But this, remember, you're back in the denial and the frustration piece.
Mm.
So it's really critical for the leader to really step up and be there for their team during the change. And that's the coaching hat. That's the supportive coaching hat. And, in identifying the expectations as the leader learns from their managers, from their leadership, and then reframing it in a positive way on moving towards that acceptance and integration.
Mm.
Right. But again, is it easy? No, there's a lot of unknowns, and people don't like unknowns. They like certainty. And change is, it creates that level of trying to navigate the uncertainty.
Mm.
That's some also why companies don't always disclose change too early, because in the face of uncertainty is when anxiety happens.
Mm. Mm. Interesting. Yeah, I'm going to look into that more because I wonder if there are any. I know there's a lot of like Harvard Business Review and other places do studies on these sorts of things and collect data. I wonder if there's any evidence that shows that that is why the majority of companies just change on a Friday or a Monday or something like that, as opposed to like maybe I wonder if dealing with the anxiety is easier than the fallout.
I don't know, but there is a point of process. So, if it comes on a Friday, they go home with their family and they got a couple days to process it,
Mm.
right? If they're for instance, if there's a big layoff but you haven't been laid off, how does this affect me? How do I process it? Or if there's a layoff in the middle of the week, well, then people are still at work, the people left behind, and they're trying to process it in the middle of work.
Mm.
There's not going to be a lot of work that's going to get done. Human nature,
Yeah. Actually,
right?
I was reading something very interesting the other day about the McDonald's layoffs where they told everyone not to go to the corporate offices and to stay home because they were
Yep.
announcing layoffs. And they said, well, oh, they're taking a cue from the big tech layoffs. But someone said, actually, I prefer it that way because then I can go and, be with my family and cry and have some shoulder to cry on and deal with it
Yeah.
emotionally so that I can do that. And I said, oh, that's very interesting because the typical way would be you go in, you sit down with your manager, and then security escorts you out, and that's humiliating. And so I've been thinking about that a lot with my Google layoffs. There had to have been a more humane way to do that than just cut your email off, perhaps, and say thanks, right? But the fact that I was home when it happened probably allowed me to digest and take action quickly
Yeah.
instead of having to commute an hour to work, get inside, find out that, I was laid off and then turn around. Like that is I think that, yeah. So I agree with that. And I never actually thought of it that way until I read that recently. I thought
Yeah.
it's very interesting that, there is a little bit of empathy built into that sort of process I think it was inadvertently. I don't think anyone said, oh well, it's better to just like you say, it's better to fire someone on a Friday because they have the weekend to process it. Like there's the Office Space movie, that funny with the Bobs.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh yeah,
Oh
we
yeah,
always
right.
fire people on a Friday, right? So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's
But
cool.
really, just to kind of wrap this up, you as a leader, any of the leaders on the team as are going through change, I want to reiterate it. Put your coaching hat on. Be supportive. Be transparent. Make sure you keep that high level of trust. Tell them what you do know. Tell them what you don't. And if you're told you can't say something and somebody asks you a question, then you can say, listen, this is really not something I'm prepared to talk about right now. Senior leadership still trying to work through it or whatever, and as soon as I have something definitive that I am capable of sharing with you, I will share it. You want to make sure you keep that level of trust, right? As long as they have that, people will stick around, they'll still work with you. And also, if you're freaking out as a lawyer, as a leader, guess what? You're going to help your people to freak out as well. So show stability. And I understand if that might be difficult, then go talk to a trusted colleague, somebody that you can talk about how you're feeling about the change, where it's not directly going to be affecting in a negative way your team. You
Mm,
really want to be there for them.
mm.
So there's a lot of stuff out there in change, and I encourage anybody who's going through change or who's a leader. Change is inevitable. Learn about it because it really is a valuable skill to learn how to be a leader through change.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for your advice, Jonathan. I definitely got a lot out of it. And thank you to our listeners. You've been listening to the Leadership Lab. Before we wrap up officially, please hit the like button to encourage us to keep doing more and more of these episodes. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell button. And we're going to be changing our distribution. So you're going to be getting the new episodes on Friday as opposed to Monday. So that way you can listen to us over the weekend and have some fresh content before you start work on Monday. So thanks again for listening. I'm Henry Kirk.
I'm Jonathan Aronson.
And again, this was the Leadership Lab. Thank you for listening.